you said a statement, and this is literally what drove me to want to have you and to be sitting here with you, Matt. You said this will be our generation's lobotomy.
It is.
That hit me. So explain what that means to you.
None of these surgeries, the more I learn about it, and from the side effects I've had on myself, they are not thorough. They haven't mastered them. We are experiments. Mm-hmm. They are testing on us. And I think there's probably a lot higher numbers of people who have regret than they're actually saying, because I think a lot of people, these are permanent life-changing decisions you are making.
Right.
These surgeries, you can't take them back. You know, I had a double mastectomy. I'm never going to get my breast back. And all these other surgeries too. And I think the people who are being quiet about it, I believe it's probably because who would want to admit that they did that to themselves?
Mm-hmm. She's truly a breath of fresh air. Tracey ignites dreams. And when you walk away from a meeting with Tracey Martin, you walk away with what I call a ripple effect.
And the type of energy that was radiating from her was like a ripple effect. I never met someone like her before, and I knew that her intentions were pure and she spoke nothing but the truth.
I couldn't imagine, honestly, anybody else who I've ever met in my life being as helpful as Tracey's been towards me and the rest of my family.
Whatever problem you've got, however dark it may be, there is no judgment, there is no finger pointing, there is only healing.
Check in with Tracey. Do the work. You got this.
Welcome to the TLM Method Podcast. I'm your host, Tracey Martin. This podcast exists to amplify the voices of Gen Z and those that are creating change in the world. To call parents to action in raising healthy, whole young adults, and to counteract the current cultural narrative that is giving you permission and at times encouraging you to live an immoral and mediocre life. I'm not calling you out, I'm calling you to action in your own life. A few years ago, a friend of mine said to me, "Hey T, you're the stone that's thrown in the water, and the clients that you work with and the people that hear you speak are the ripple effect that go out and create change in the world." That's what I'm doing. I'm calling you to action and calling you to create your own ripple effect of change. Hello and welcome back to the TLM Method Podcast. I'm your host, Tracey, and as you guys know, I am normally the one sitting here ranting, but I actually have a guest today, which I'm super excited about, and it's one of those things where, you know, you're kind of here lonely in the studio with your own thoughts, which can get me into a lot of trouble. But I've got Matt Rey in the studio with me, and I know you guys probably have heard of him. I am super excited to do this because we've tried a couple times by way of haphazardous things happening. So this is finally here today, and I'm super excited. So stay tuned for lots of information, for contacts on these guys, on his movement with Gays Against Groomers, as well as anything that we think is relevant to this topic. I want to put the links in the show notes. So please hang in there, guys. This is going to be a good one. So, Matt, first of all, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
This is big for me because I know that there's a lot going on in the world today, right? And I know you guys drove down here to be in studio, which I am honestly grateful for that because I love in person better.
It's so much better. It feels more authentic.
It does, right? And I think it's where on the screen we're kind of dismissed, and I think we've done enough of that shit for a long enough time. So I would love it if you would just give us a little background on yourself, on kind of how you got here where you are right now.
Sure. So my name is Matt Rey. I'm 31 years old. I'm a trans man, meaning I'm a biological female who transitioned because I had a mental illness called gender dysphoria. Okay. I think it's important that we state that because people are trying to cover up what it is, and it is a mental illness. There's no other way to describe it. If you feel like you're in the wrong body, it has to be. What else can it be if it's a feeling, you know? So my story goes back at age 5 was when I first started feeling this way. And I told my mum and my dad, and they laughed because a 5-year-old telling them they think they're a boy probably sounds hilarious, especially when I thought I was Batman at the same time as well. I used to go and have a towel on my head, you know, and go, no, all of that. So, like, you know.
Which most kids do.
They do.
Right?
They do.
The whole costume part.
100%. So, you know, like I told this and they said to me, look, don't be silly. And then as the years went on, especially when I hit puberty, it became a recurring thing. And the talk started turning into, hey, listen, because my name was Amy before. And it started turning into things like, hey, maybe you're a tomboy. Maybe you might end up being a lesbian, you know. at the time, this used to make me pretty angry, you know, when you're a kid and you get
You feel like
told
you're being
no.
dismissed.
Yes, yeah, I did. And I thought that they were being really, really cruel. And I went through quite a bit of depression about it. But as I got older and I realized what this whole transitioning thing really entails, especially when I went through the medicalization myself, which I started at age 26, I realized that they couldn't have treated me any better because they allowed me to express myself. You know, my parents let me have my hair short. I was wearing soccer kits, hanging around with the lads. You know, I was never a girly girl. And when I look back, it makes so much sense because, especially since I've been speaking out, I've had a lot of parents are the people who look to us the most because they're so worried about their kids right now. And I have had a lot of women in particular turn around and say, I'm so glad that I was born when I was and not now, because they were huge tomboys and they feel like they would have been encouraged to transition.
100%, that was me.
And you know, a lot of them say they've got kids now, they're happily married, and they're really girly now. And I honestly think it makes sense with the fact that a lot of girls, especially when they hit puberty, we're seeing this rise in both with biological males and females, but the female number has rocketed the most. And it's because, you know, you get periods and no one wants a period. It's not enjoyable. And when you're young and you find out you might carry a baby one day, I mean, that's one of the biggest gifts you could have. But at that age, you're like, I don't want to do that.
It's scary.
It's scary.
It's scary. And depending upon who your parents are and what your conversation is in your home, it can be even more so, which I hear from a lot of my kids.
100%. And a lot of girls don't get on with girls when they're younger too. I know I didn't because I found they gossiped too much. So I always wanted to hang around with the boys. Yeah, that's the word. You know, so like these things happen. And I always kept to myself, even when I went through my transition. I was never someone who would associate myself with the LGBTQ community because I felt like they made their sexual orientation their whole personality. And so I used to keep to myself. But then I started seeing the stuff about the kids happening recently. And I was really nervous at first, I'm going to be honest with you, because these people, they attack.
Oh, yeah.
And they attack in
They're ruthless.
Vulgar ways. Like the things they have said to me, and I've seen them say to other people, I don't even know how someone can even type those things sometimes, what comes out of their mouth. But
that's the thing. It's they're keyboard warriors. They're not having a human conversation.
Exactly.
That's where I think they get their strength from.
They do, because I guarantee they wouldn't say half the things they do face to face.
No.
They wouldn't dare because the stuff is so disgusting. But I got to this point where I couldn't just be quiet anymore, and I've got a lot of faith too. I believe in God, and I was
it's
like,
the armor of God that gets us through
it gave me the strength, you know. I kept feeling that knock at my heart, like, you can do this, I've got you, and when God's for you, no one can be against you. You know how it is. And so I just had this fire in me, and one day I saw Rachel Levine speaking, and that was it.
Yeah.
I just let it all out, and then Jamie contacted me, and I was the first trans person to join Gays Against Groomers.
Nice.
And it's just been a roller coaster since then. I'm so stunned at how huge the organization has gotten in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
We're coming up to 7 months, and it's sent waves.
But I think the biggest thing for people to understand is that whenever it's like this conversation couldn't have happened 3 years ago.
No.
Our culture wasn't ready. Our society wasn't ready for it. And so you have to look at God prepares the messenger to be in that moment of time. And I think it's an Esther verse, but that's kind of where you're made for such a time as this. And so when you start to realize that, then the fear comes in, right? Because and I've been in there too. I mean, I've had plenty of moments. The layers that God's placed on my life are, we could be here for 5 hours to talk about it. But what you understand is that, so my daughter's vaccine injured, and she's 23, and she's bald, eyelashes, eyebrows, no hair. She's 23, still no hair. And she's an absolutely stunning creature with such a beautiful voice. But what changed her, and she went down the path, you know, of self-harming, and I mean, you name it, the whole thing, until she found Christ, and that really came by way of her husband too. And so I'm very convicted when I see these things, not just because of that, but because I have the empathy and the compassion that I think we've disconnected because we're such a screen-based, device-based world that we forget this. So, Matt, what do you think? So when you said you saw Rachel Levine speak, what was that talk about?
Empowering trans children to go through gender reassignment.
Wow.
The word empowering was what made me sick to my stomach, because
Yeah.
they really like to dress this up as something really appealing. And, you know, I've seen since then as well, YouTube, they target their audience, and several youth reached out to me showing me the ads that they were being shown, puberty blockers, and they make it seem so appealing. They show a traffic stoplight with, it's simple, you just pause your puberty. That's absolute lies. And
Wow.
these people who are pushing all of this, we need to take note, because they have to be held accountable. They are mutilating children.
Well, there's an evil behind this. And I think a lot of people can't grasp that because it's an invisible evil. You know, I see even like with the movement towards what's happening in our world with all the food supplies and everything, you look at that, I'm like, but there is a nefarious movement back here. And I think if you don't have a strong faith, it's hard for you to connect the dots because you don't realize, well, nobody would intentionally do this. You know, it's like when you hear the Klaus Schwab and all that kind of stuff talk, it's like, no, you don't understand. You have to get past and get out of the weeds. And then I think you can. So when it came down to the children, so you were 28 when you transitioned.
26.
26,
Yes.
okay. And then what was that process, if you can share that with us? Like, what was that process for you? What was that like?
Okay, so I went through my process back in England. It was before I moved here, and it was at Tavistock, which actually recently got shut down for being unsafe for children.
Wow.
Tavistock in the UK was the sole gender clinic. So wherever you were in the UK, if you were referred by your general practitioner, Tavistock would be where you'd wait for an appointment. And the waiting lists were always pretty long. I think I waited originally after my referral about a year to go to the first appointment. But
Wow.
once you get to that stage, it really is when I look back, a very affirm approach. I went to my first appointment, and that was meant to be where you start your psychiatric assessment. And it wasn't how I imagined it. When I was told that there would be an assessment to find out whether you really were, how you felt, I imagined it being rather thorough and, you know, asking specific questions to get an idea of what the person is really going through.
Well,
But
not only that, you would think there would be some sort of a neurological brain scan of how, because trauma affects the brain.
That's true. But the questions I literally was asked was, how do you feel? And obviously, what am I going to say? Oh, I feel like I'm a man, which when I look back, that doesn't make sense because I've never been a man, so I wouldn't actually know what that felt like. But
what does it feel like?
They have a very clever way of using language that manipulates you. Like, I can truly admit that when I first went through the process, I was incredibly brainwashed. Like, I was under the impression you could just change your gender. And actually living through it is maturing and realizing that it is a goal you will never actually achieve. Like, I may look like a man right now because physically I know I pass, and I get told it all the time. Some people don't even believe I'm transgendered half the time.
Okay.
But behind all of this, I am a biological woman, and my body parts are female, and I will never truly understand what it means because I am not a man. And they have found this way to delude people into really thinking you can just become biologically a different gender. I've seen trans women claiming they are biological females.
Yes.
And I just don't know how we got there.
Well, and that's where you look at the deception, the deceit, the misinformation, and the vulnerability of the mental part. And even like the younger kids right now, I always tell them, I said, your generation was prepared for this message because it would have never happened in my generation. We would have said, fuck off.
Yeah.
I mean, you would not have they would not have gained the ground that they have. And I think that it's a hard thing too, because I always tell Gen Z when I speak to them, I'm like, you guys, you're fighting for your future at this point. And I know you may not be able to grasp your head, and that's why like some of my ambassadors that I work with, they get it, you know, but they've been working with me for a long time and understanding what's at stake. And I think if you don't understand that, and if you don't have, you know, the foundation, and if you don't have the support and all that stuff, you kind of get thrown into this vulnerable place. And when you said earlier that it is mental illness, you know, of the gender dysphoria part of it, we've never affirmed mental illness before. You know, we never have. I mean, years ago, that vulnerable generation was bulimia and anorexia and all those things. And I don't know if you've read the book Irreversible Damage.
No.
By Abigail Schreier. Really good, because she talks about it being up 4,400% in that young, vulnerable, and it typically is like 14 to 19-year-old young women. And so that's where you look at, you know, I always tell, I have one of my clients' moms who's battling this with her daughter right now. She said, you know, we can't build the plane when we're mid-flight. And that hit me, that you said a statement, and this is literally what drove me to want to have you and to be sitting here with you, Matt. You said this will be our generation's lobotomy.
It is.
That hit me. So explain what that means to you.
None of these surgeries, the more I learn about it and from the side effects I've had on myself, they are not thorough. They haven't mastered them. We are experiments. They are testing on us. And I think there's probably a lot higher numbers of people who have regret than they're actually saying, because I think a lot of people, these are permanent life-changing decisions you are making.
Right.
These surgeries, you can't take them back. You know, I had a double mastectomy. I'm never going to get my breast back. And all these other surgeries too. And I think the people who are being quiet about it, I believe it's probably because who would want to admit that they did that to themselves? And
Well, and you're so far down the journey. I think it really takes a very strong-willed person to go, wait a minute, I didn't know what I didn't know. And to go back on that, that's a very humble person. And I don't know if people possess that today.
not many people do. There is a
No.
lot of conceitedness, but I think partly to blame for it is the fact that we're living in a society that encourages and enables victim mentality. All you have to do now is announce one day that you're non-binary, and you're going to have a whole comment section saying you're the bravest person they've ever known. Is that really all it takes, just to decide you're
Well, and here's
someone
the other
else?
thing too, Matt. So my daughter and I'm going to call it was University of Arizona, and so they are starting to pay for gender reassignment surgeries, which blows my mind. And she went to fill out some what's the term, like financial stuff, you know. And I said, go after a scholarship, whatever. And so on this document, it asks you, are you a non-binary person? Are you a victim of this? Are you that? So this is literally a legal document from a university saying that if you identify in any of these areas, we will give you money. But yet she's like, I'm a straight white female, so no. So then none of those things. It doesn't have anything to do with your academics, with what you've qualified for, with your merit. And I think what you said, the victimization and the entitlement and all that mixed in with this disgusting soup of humanity that we have right now, it is giving people permission. What is and maybe you don't know this, what is the thing in California coming up that if you identify as something, you get like $1,800?
I was about to mention this.
Yeah.
If I went, say my citizenship came through right now, right, and I moved to California, they would give me an allowance, just because I'm trans. They would give me an allowance.
Wow.
Like, what is that? This is when you need to see there is an agenda at play here, because
Exactly.
it's almost bribery, isn't it? When you think about it, it's, hey, like, because we're living in times of very high inflation. A lot of people can't even afford eggs, for example, and then they're saying, hey, if you're trans, we'll just give you money.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's insanity.
Yeah, but you're right. It's the agenda. It's the nefarious part behind it, and that's where people can't get out of the weeds. They can't understand that this is legitimately. It's like that's also the town that is giving people drug paraphernalia, you know, to continue the drug usage. You know, so I mean, one of the things that I always talk about with my kids and families is that if you don't have a strong sense of self, you have to find reinforcement that actually can help you seek out who you're becoming. Not who you are right now, because we know that really is what we're struggling with, right? That's the pain that we want to figure out. How do we stop this pain? But if you realize that it's there for you to question, for you to understand, that's where Christ comes in, and that's where your relationship comes in too. And that's exactly what this is about. This is about disconnecting you from your Creator. Because when you do that, it changes the game.
And for example, you've got people identifying as theys. That's plural, you know, like people identifying as multiple people. And it really is an attack on people's sense of self. I look at it, and a lot of people don't know who they are.
Right.
And it's not just because of things like this. When you look back at all these agendas, other than the whole gender thing, people have been attacked for a long time. We're living in a society that is very based on trauma. So many people have traumas, especially the youth.
Yes.
So many youth are suffering with something, whether it's gender dysphoria, body dysmorphia. They are not happy with themselves. And then I think, why is this? Well, it's kind of obvious when you think about it. All these years we've had media outlets, magazines, getting pictures of celebrities, their ankle looks funny or something. Oh, look at that, look at that. So we've been raised in a society where we're meant to judge ourselves and always want to look better than we do, and we're not good enough. And it's really sad. It is really, really sad, and
is.
no wonder it's led to things like this.
And that's why I think that that young girls' age is the most vulnerable, because that's really when you start to question. Then if you've got brothers, you're like, oh, I want to be like my brothers.
Yeah,
I want to
mean,
be like that.
Being when you look at boys, especially when they're growing up, they can just throw on whatever clothes they want. But being a girl, there's this expectation to always have nice hair, have makeup, and all these things. And it's just, no, they don't want to do all of that.
It's a lot of pressure.
It
I mean, I
is.
was the girl that literally rolled out of bed, put my Wrangler jeans, my cowboy boots, and jumped on my horse. But I had parents that were like, and I was an athlete all my life. I mean, my parents never questioned, but it wasn't the culture either back then. And I think that's where, so what do you see in your 31, right?
Yeah.
In your 31 years of on this planet, what do you see where there was a tipping point that you can identify? Can you?
And it's honestly been in the last few years, because I remember even being at school, okay? Like, when I was at school, even being gay was still seen as taboo.
Yeah.
And like, there was this girl who came out as a lesbian, and this other girl bullied her relentlessly. And the one who bullied her turned out to be the biggest lesbian I've ever met. Do you know what I mean? But like, this is what I mean, how quickly it's changed. So
Yes.
even when I was in school, and I left school in 2007, and I noticed the rise start to really take place. The gay community rise, 2017.
Okay.
I started to see a lot more pride events and things
Okay.
like that, but it was still kind of tame. I remember going to I would never associate myself with pride now, but there used to be a parade that would go on where I'm from, and I went with my friends a few times, and it used to be rather tasteful, people just in really nice costumes and floats, and
it's a gathering
and
of
now it's like a
community.
public sex show.
Yes.
I mean, I've seen literal footage of a young girl dragging two men with gimp masks on a lead. I mean, this is disgusting. How have we got to this point? Why is it so sleazy? Why is it so distasteful? I mean,
Degeneracy.
if you're really just about wanting to be able to love who you love, why do you have to make it so overly sexualized? Why do we keep hearing all of this horrible culture coming out of that community? Like, you don't see it happening you don't see straight couples doing parades where they're like, I'm going to put on a gimp mask and do a pub. Why would you do that? It's if anything, it's not going to help with the acceptance. It's going to push people further away.
That's what it's doing.
And we're seeing it. I've seen people with so much anger, and I get people comment on my videos, and it saddens me. It's nice what they say to me, but it saddens me when they say stuff like, it is so refreshing to see someone trans saying this. And that shouldn't be the case. There should be more people like me speaking up.
Right.
This should be the norm. Why does society not know how to protect kids anymore?
Well, do you believe that your actual message has been hijacked?
I think it has, because we've got Carol in our organization. You might have seen her video where she said if she'd have known when she fought for her rights all those.
Yeah.
Really powerful video, and that
She
breaks
said
my
that
heart.
if she would have fought for rights, she wouldn't have voted to be able to be married. Wasn't that it?
Yeah,
Or what was it?
if she knew that it would have led to kids at drag shows, child mutilation, she would have never fought for her rights. And that's where we're at. She was one of the OGs who was there fighting for them, and now she regrets it. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I think that's where people don't realize. I always say this like metaphor of like, we're like the frog in the boiling water, right? It's like, you throw a frog in hot water, they jump out.
Yeah.
You throw them in, slowly turn it up, they boil to death. And then you go back and you go, how do you stop the bus, right? And I think that's what you just said. I have a couple in Arizona here. I love them. They're married and they adopted 2 children. It's a gay couple. They adopted 2 children years and years ago. So they were actually in one of my fashion shows, and it was 2 dads. And it was just such a beautiful thing. They own a company. They're very productive. They just want to live their life. And so for me, it's like, where's the movement going whenever you look at productive members of society living your life, living fulfilled lives versus this debauchery and just literal deviancy?
It's really horrible, but I honestly believe that they're weaponizing the LGBT community in order to open the door to paedophilia.
1,000%.
That is where it is going, and the signs are everywhere. Look at the education being pushed right now. Look at the books that kids are being given in schools with literal descriptions on how to have anal sex, how to give oral sex. Since when did 13-year-olds need to know that?
Right.
And younger.
Right.
You know,
it's definitely younger.
There's this group of incredible women in the country of Wales who are standing up against the education. They're called Public Child Protection Wales, and what I saw that they did a presentation, in advance of September last year when the curriculum was going to be brought in.
Right.
And they did a presentation showing everything coming to the schools, and I cried. I could
Oh my
not believe
gosh.
how bad it was. Okay, for example, I saw footage. This is going to be shown to. It was 12 and up. Okay. It was footage of a banana being dipped in chocolate spread, and then it said 20% of women do anal. Why do kids need to know that?
Wow.
Why do kids need to know that?
Wow.
It's absolutely horrific. And then you look at the WHO, age 0 to 4, children to learn early childhood masturbation and what is good and bad
I saw
touch.
that.
Now, this all goes back to Alfred Kinsey.
I did a podcast on him. I did, and
It's
most
dark.
people. I'm
It's
telling you,
dark.
I tell people. I'll send you the podcast that we did.
I'd love to hear it.
I went down the path only so far, was because I don't want. And I encourage people, get the books, read it on
Yeah.
your own if you got the stomach for it.
Yeah, you definitely have to be something you delve into on your own, because for a podcast or something, it's too heavy. Not
It
everyone's
is.
good. No trigger warning can prepare you for what you're going to read if you look into that stuff.
No, and people don't realize that it's still alive in the Indiana University today,
It is.
and
They
it's
gave him a
taxpayer
statue.
money.
They just built him a statue.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, Indiana, the Bloomington University campus literally has a statue dedicated to him now, and it was all over the news. And I made a video on it, and the video went viral, and several parents actually rang the university, telling them how disgusting it was. And the last call, someone commented saying they'd called, and they were told they had a high volume of calls. So I'm
I'm
hoping they pull
sure.
that statue down.
It needs to come down.
I won't hold my breath though. We know what these people are like.
Well, you know what's behind it. You
Yeah.
know, I think, and that's where I think, like I said, the frog in the water, right? And then it's like pornography. You know, the influence of that in our young men's minds right now is part of it. Nobody even knows what a healthy relationship even looks like, and the judgment behind it is personal. But when you look at it from a standpoint of what does it look like? So if something is built and kind of founded, or there's like a foundation of mental illness and of deviancy in that, then it makes total sense where we are today. That and sexual trauma is even 100% worse.
Yeah, there's actually a big connection with people who have suffered abuse as children and transitioning later in life, especially in biological males.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. We need to look into that.
Yeah, it's really sad. And there's also been a study that came out of Cambridge showing a huge overlap between gender dysphoria and autism.
Makes total sense.
It
That
does.
makes total sense.
It does, especially when they have, the neurodivergent side of it, and
Mm-hmm.
you have the Asperger's, and the fact that they disassociate themselves. It's very and
society.
This is being dressed up as something really appealing too. So it's like, oh, that looks fun, and
Yeah.
they are more easily influenced. And I'm on the spectrum myself, so I know exactly.
I think
how
we
it
all
is.
are,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Oh, of course we are. The technology has been frying our brains for
Yeah.
years.
No, I tell my kids all the time, I go, their parents are like, well, they can't focus, they're ADD. I go, let's just get their phones out of their hands.
Yeah.
Let's just try there.
Honestly.
Before we start giving labels and medication, let's just go there first, So what do you see? I mean, I know for your world, like what you're doing, what are you creating, Matt, for yourself? Like what drives you? What do you want to create for yourself as far as like a life with little Jude over there?
Honestly, I think of it as, if we don't protect our way of living right now, then there is no future. And the children, what are they? They are the future. And I like to think that by speaking up, other people will become brave enough to do the same, because I've had so many people say they're too scared to.
I hear that all the
And
time.
I like to think as well that by standing for what's right, I'm earning my place in the kingdom of heaven.
Well, and I think people don't realize there are consequences for remaining complacent and compliant
are.
and quiet, and that's where people don't. It's so interesting. It's almost like and I'm way older than you are, but if you look at like how we got here, you look at, everyone has to be kind, tolerant, and acceptance until when? When do you step in? What is your tolerance? What is it? And I was talking to one of my clients the other day, and I'm like, so if that's the case, and I believe that too, isn't the most beautiful form of love, telling someone the truth?
Yes, because this is the thing. No matter how painful the truth might be, it will always resonate so much more than lies, even if you don't want to believe it, you know. And standing for truth is such a beautiful thing, no matter how dark it is, because we're living in a world where so many people are just complacent. And with the events that are taking place right now, especially with this mutilation of children, it makes me wonder, when is enough for you guys? How far are you going to let this go? Are you going to literally have to have a child of your own who is going to resent you one day because you enabled them for you to realize how wrong this is? You know, like there used to be a time when the common goal for everyone, no matter what their political views were as well, was to protect children. But now, if you protect children with this topic, you're far right. This has become a political thing, and if that doesn't sum up the mental illness of today that we are living in, I really don't know what will.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. And it was funny. So I mean, as like you, I post all kinds of different stuff, and I always look at the reactions. Yeah. Like what triggers the most, like anger or whatever, and it's never to protect kids. And I always say, isn't there a common thing here? And I'm a mother of 2 daughters, and I have a little grandson. So it's like, you know, I mean, I cannot be quiet during this time. I can't look at my kids, no matter how annoyed they get with me sometimes, because I understand. But I think, too, what you said, too, though, Matt, I think there is a level of responsibility that parents are not taking, that older generations are not taking, because they don't understand what's at stake here. And we didn't get this world. We inherited this. We've never fought for it before.
Exactly.
We've never fought for it before. And so when you look at that, what is your message like? What is your relationship with your parents now?
It's good. I mean, I'm here, so the time zone sucks, so I don't get to speak to them as much as I'd like to. But it's really good. And my dad's been a lot more vocal with his support for my work than my mum.
Okay.
But I think my mum's supportive, but she's someone who doesn't really like stepping forward and speaking up. She doesn't really like confrontation, which I can understand because these people are brutal. But my dad's been very supportive, and he said if anyone disagrees with me, then I'm not going to say the words. But
That's good. That's good.
He's in my corner, that's for sure.
No, it's good.
But it's really nice to see, and honestly, I was not expecting as the amount of support that I've actually got for speaking up. And what is really sad is the people on the left love to preach tolerance and acceptance, but I've had nothing but hate from them. And all of the kind words have come from conservatives. The people who apparently are the most intolerant and homophobic and transphobic are the ones saying, thank you for giving the voices a voice.
Right.
Because that's what they are. The children, think about it, right? They go to school, and what do they expect to do at school? They expect to learn things. And there's this horrible pattern where times have changed. I remember when I used to come back from school and my parents felt like I taught them something new because of new things. So how dangerous is that when children are now coming home after learning gender ideology and saying, hey, Mum, Dad, did you know there's 1,000 genders?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Right?
And so these parents, I honestly don't believe all of them are doing it to be edgy or progressive.
I agree.
I think when you've got these TRAs propped on pedestals by these big corporations and the media saying, would you rather have a trans child or a dead child? You're
That's
then
just
putting
horrible.
some unwanted guilt, even before anything's even happened, on a parent going, oh, is that what's going to happen? Will my kid kill themselves? And it's completely wrong. The argument does not end there, because when you think about it, you're more likely to end your life if you've made a choice you can never take back.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, where's the danger in waiting? And this takes me back to my own personal experience. I tried to kill myself when I was 17 years old because I still felt the way I did. And I'd had a chat with my parents again recently, and that's when they'd given me the whole tomboy spiel.
Yeah.
And I came to in the hospital, and in England at the time, you had to be 18 to be able to go ahead with things.
Okay.
And the doctor was like, why'd you do this? And so I told him, I feel like this. And he was like, how old are you? I said, 17. He said, and when are you 18? Oh, in a few months. Then why did you try and kill yourself? Because you could, you know, so like, what's the harm in waiting? I mean, I've had bad side effects, but he was right. You know, it could have been a phase of me as well. And it has been. I mean, the NHS recently came out saying that a lot of trans kids are actually just going through a phase. Yep. And I've heard a lot of amazing stories of that too, where parents told me their kid thought they were trans, and then a few years have passed and they're more masculine or feminine than ever, and it's like it never happened.
Right.
You
And
know?
I think too, I think it goes back to being allowed to do that in a safe
Yeah,
environment.
yeah.
When you're not in a safe environment, which our families are not anymore, they've been completely torn apart.
Yeah.
There's not a foundation. Then now enter in the teachers,
Mm-hmm.
in that now it's like that the teachers don't have to tell the parents.
Yep.
It's just
dividing the
they're
nuclear
dividing
family.
families.
Yep.
Yes.
It's really awful to see, and I find it so inappropriate and disgusting as well when we're seeing all of these teachers on TikTok. That's the most unprofessional thing I can think of, to have your teacher on TikTok, and they're pushing such dangerous ideologies. They're turning around and bragging about how they managed to get their whole class to confess to having pronouns, and how they've driven a wedge into
Yes.
the families by saying that their parents are unsafe, and I'll put you on puberty blockers about your parents knowing, don't worry. And that literally happened in Connecticut. This
So
the school
disgusting.
nurse, okay, she went on Facebook and exposed that the school that she was working at had put 2 students on blockers, and 10 were identifying as non-binary without parental consent. She exposed that, and how was she rewarded for telling the truth? She was fired.
Well, that's like the whistleblower from St. Louis University. They said they transitioned 600 kids. And that's my hometown. I'm from Missouri, and that's my hometown. I could not believe that. And she actually came out like a couple weeks ago and said she couldn't do it anymore. And it's those kinds of things, I think, that when you go back to the family, the support, the teachers, their environment is built for confusion. It's built for chaos, and then they're not prepared for it either.
It is.
And it's horrible.
I mean, I saw a video the other day. This teacher has been fired, but she was making her class pledge allegiance to the LGBT flag.
Oh my gosh.
She didn't have no American flag in her room. She had that one, and she was getting them
To do it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
the kids want to please the authority figure in their life. I think that's the biggest thing is that when I talk to younger kids that I coach, because some of the kids are like 10, it's like, it's kind of like your parents, your hero when you're that age. And then, of course, when you're teenagers, you rebel. But then you reach out to either someone else that you can, whether it's a mentor or somebody. And when they're that young, it's an authority figure. I mean, I have a client I have a couple clients that are going through this right now, and they don't know they can question this authority figure. And then you look at the natural rebellion of teens and parents. It's a natural thing that we all do. But then you eventually go back because they have your best interests. And even though you may not, like society tells you, and it's funny, since World War II, they basically said we live in a children's generation, which means we no longer revere older generations for information and for guidance, which is detrimental. And then add in TikTok and people I always laugh. I'm like, you think TikTok blew up by accident during COVID? No, you guys were all completely in where they wanted
Right
you.
where they wanted you. They had you locked in. What else can you do other than scroll through your For You page?
Yep. And then if I have one client who sent me photos, like you're talking earlier about the ads, the ads are coming in on all this stuff and saying top surgery is not a big deal. This is no big deal. I mean, these are literal ads.
I can tell you for a fact, top surgery is a big deal. I mean, I've had horrible health issues from my top
Really?
surgery. I have permanent nerve damage on this side. My wife can't even cuddle me in bed because my whole body starts to spasm if she even leans on it the slightest bit. I nearly lost one of my nipples. I remember waking up in the night with my stitches opening up and I was covered in blood. They're doing this to kids.
Yeah.
This is what makes me sick. When I had my top surgery when I was almost 30, and I had a really bad time. Jude and I weren't even able to be physically together at the time. I was still in England, and she was having to watch me suffer over the phone, and she was so worried about me.
Yeah.
And when I had my surgery, I'd never even been put to sleep before or had any surgery, so that was a major
Trauma.
And I learned what post-surgery depression was.
It's a
They
thing.
didn't prep you for any of this stuff either. I wasn't told, hey, you might get depressed for a while. Hey, this might not go as great as you think it's going to go. I was just given this idea of, how exciting is this? You're finally getting your breast removed. And I was like, yay. And then it happened. And
Well,
it's not yay.
It's not yay. And even like the industries of like therapy and counseling, they're now having to affirm within the bylaws of their license.
Yeah, this is the thing. Like, you can't even trust the therapy anymore because they're being paid to say yes. They're being paid to just listen to how you feel, that is a therapist's job, but they're also meant to give their 2 cents in if it's this kind of life-altering decision. But instead, it's, how do you feel? Like a boy. Oh, off you go. If you have the money to go private as well, if you have that kind of money, it's like getting a Disney fast pass. You're sent straight away. You haven't got to wait for it. Because I went through the journey in the UK, and I went through it on the NHS, so mine was a slightly longer wait. But my cousin also ended up, this is what's really strange, my cousin ended up coming out as trans, and
younger or older?
Younger, not much younger, in like 4 years or so, but came out as trans and went private and was on testosterone so much faster than I was put on it. I was already on it at that point, of course, but when I saw the weight, there's no weight at all. It's, oh, you've got the money, ka-ching, let's go.
Wow. So it is a money thing.
It is. It's a business. It is a business.
It is a business.
And
it's like anything else with our health. It's a business. And it's
It
like,
is.
I talk about people with like the whole cholesterol bullshit and all that kind of stuff. I go, they make a lot of money, you guys, from stents
They
and,
do.
and balloons in your heart.
Have you seen the footage that was leaked from that meeting with the surgeons and nurses in that hospital?
I know, but tell me, and then we'll post it in the story.
Okay, I'll need to find it again. I'll dig it up. But they were having a conversation, and they were talking about how, so they get paid by their superiors, don't they? They were talking about earning over $1 million. Wow. For doing this.
That's vile.
So of course they're going to say yes.
Yeah.
They're not going to care about who you are as an individual because they're thinking that's a nice paycheck.
It's money driven.
Yeah.
I've had parents call me and say, "Are you a gender affirming coach?" I go, "Yeah, look in your pants." Literally, and then it's like, and because you have to, if you don't shove that back on them, you have to, and then it's a conversation, and then you also look that you're right about parents. They are scared to death when it comes to their young children. They are, and we do a parents workshop next week on next February, or next week on Thursday, and that's part of the conversation is the influence that these kids have. Even if they have a question, it's like you take your phone and you start to just research a little bit. Now you've built that whole entire narrative through your algorithms to feed your questions that you have anyway.
Yeah, and we're at the point now where parents are having their children taken off them in some states for standing against this.
Yeah.
I mean, that story about that father in Texas who
it's gut-wrenching.
That absolutely broke me. And that's not even the first situation I've heard of that. I've heard
quite a
several where they've just called them evil and taken them away, from their children. And why? Because they want to protect them.
Mm-hmm. Well, it goes back to the parents who want to treat their kids' cancer naturally without all the chemicals. Yeah. I don't think the state gets to step in at that point, personally. I mean, you'd have to haul me away and lock me up at that point. I mean, because it's my kids are everything to me.
They're taken away in multiple ways a parent's ability to safeguard their child. And
okay, so you spoke Monday.
Yes.
At that. So tell me a little bit about that your school board conversation.
So there was a member of the school board who has been confusing children. He was a male. He's transitioned into a female, and he's been allegedly using the little girls' restrooms and getting the kids to address him in a certain way. And that was who Patriot Barbie had an issue with as well.
Right, right.
So we went down there to explain how important it is that gender ideology isn't taught and why it's so dangerous. And I wanted to be there from a trans perspective to address him trans to trans.
Right.
And when we got there, we actually turned up at the right time because the first 3 parents to get up on that podium all were talking about the exact same thing. They are very concerned.
They are.
There was one father who was like, is it true that this member of the board is using the little girls' restrooms because my little girl's starting here soon, and I don't want that happening. Because his child also was on the spectrum as well, so she had disability.
That's very vulnerable.
Yeah, very vulnerable. So these parents were incredibly concerned, and the worst thing was, even after we'd finished our speeches, and so had the parents, the board members were given an opportunity in that moment to address anything that was said in those speeches, and the board member did nothing.
Wow. How do you get that position and be able to have that kind of an influence in our schools? I don't understand that. I mean, and that goes back to parents have been trusting too, way too trusting of who's in their classrooms with their kids. I think that's part of the problem.
And, one thing that did shock me as well, when you do watch my speech, there are two women sat in the background, older women, and they roll their eyes at me and they shake their head multiple times, and I'm actually really stunned because I would have thought older women, older people in general, they would have seen how this insanity has happened because it was never like it for them. So you'd think they would be understanding,
yeah, exactly.
but instead
They'd be
were
grateful
rolling
to
their
you.
eyes at me. Yeah, they were rolling their eyes at me. One of them was blowing bubbles of her gum, and I was thinking,
Wow.
you don't care about kids?
Right.
And that was kind of disheartening. I mean, I expect opposition, but I didn't expect, those women should have known better.
Yeah. And it goes back to, again, what's your threshold of pain, right? It's like when it comes to kids, to me, there isn't a question.
Yeah.
There should never be a question of protecting
it should be
a child.
a common ground that everyone comes together on, because the children are the future. It's like children and animals, they both represent innocence. That's what they are, and surely you want to preserve innocence.
They're losing it so quickly.
They are.
It's so sad.
I mean, I think back to when I was a kid, and some of the cuss words that are used today, I didn't even learn those words until I was like late teenagers, and now
Right.
you hear really young children like using the C word.
Like it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just think, what is happening?
It's-
We know what's happening, but
Well,
it's
and I
heartbreaking.
think it's also a moral decline, without a doubt. I mean, taking God out of school,
Yes.
whatever your belief system
Yeah.
is, that for me is a big one.
It's huge.
Not being able to. I realize our country isn't perfect, but I also know that we don't have anybody. The wall in Mexico isn't there to keep us going from over to
Mm-hmm.
Mexico. People come here for a reason, and I think that those people that are born here take it for granted. Number one, they don't understand.
They do. I mean, I've had so many Americans say to me that I am more passionate about this country than a lot of Americans, and that is a common thing where people who move here have so much more gratitude. But
Right.
I can hands down say America is the greatest country in the world. And that is why it's being destroyed so badly, because it's such a powerhouse, and it is being poisoned from the inside out in every single way, whether it's communism.
Well, Gorbachev said that in 1960. He said, "We will take the United States out without firing one shot. We'll do it from the inside out."
It's happening. I mean, it's really, really sad. I've seen footage of Americans who don't understand how lucky they are to be in this country. The students saying, "I hate being American. Americans rooted on all of this evil." And I think if you go to some other countries and you will want to be back in America in a heartbeat.
But then they don't
have
go.
Your Second Amendment here. You have your, like, this is the thing. Like, I used to love my country, England, and when I see what America is like, I realize how terrible England really is. There is no sense of patriotism. And they
Right.
make patriotism sound like it's a bad thing, but it's not. Patriotism is a love for your country and wanting to stand for your country. And they've turned it into this horrible, toxic thing because they want people to lose all sense of freedom. And if you can attack that patriotism inside someone, then you'll do anything these people say.
Well, you're very easily controlled at that
Exactly.
point. And I think that's really why when we look at the younger generation, to me, it's twofold. Their innocence, 100% need. Otherwise, you don't have a fighting chance as a successful adult. The other part of it is that then they are our future. If they're dumbed down through education, if they're dumbed down through social media, pornography, if weed is legalized, alcohol is socially accepted, it's all going after their brain. And I tell a lot of my kids, I'm like, years ago, they used to send our brightest and best off to war. Right? Our young men were gone. Now it's a spiritual battle, and it's a battle for your mind.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of the younger people watch all of this reality TV, and what does reality TV do? You've got shows like Love Island and X on the Beach that glamorize chasing people who aren't emotionally available and who are going to cheat on you. Oh, he cheated on
Have
me,
you seen
but
the
he's
new
so
one?
good looking. No, what's this one?
The MILF Manor.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah. So there's a new one. So it's on the Learning Channel. It's called MILF Manor. Which, by the way, girls, being called a MILF is not a compliment. Let's just get that out of the way. Or a DILF. But then on top of that, so it's moms that are on the show with their sons, and the other women on the show want to have sex with the other women's sons.
No, that's so toxic.
Yeah.
See, this is the thing, though. Like, they glamorize these things, and then you see all these youth going, "Why can't I hold down a relationship?" Well, you're being taught to chase after people who have great charisma, but they're narcissists. They're really terrible people. I remember watching this show back in England called X on the Beach, and this guy called Gaz, he's from a reality show already. So he was like the celebrity member on the show that time. And he's known for sleeping with a lot of girls. And This girl was on the TV going, I know I'm not going to be 1001. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like this.
That's your aspiration.
Yeah, she was
That's
like,
your
I'm not going to be
aspiration.
just 1001. He really loves me. And it didn't last. Of course it didn't. But
No.
But this is the kind of, they got people chasing people
Yeah.
who cannot handle relationships.
And that's why it's based in sex, because
It is.
sexual trauma to me is one of the deepest,
Yeah.
rootest, darkest traumas. So tell me a little bit about Gays Against Groomers, like what their mission is, their organization, and how you are connected with them.
We are a group of lesbian, gay, bi, and trans people who are against the indoctrination, medicalization, and sexualization of children in the name of LGBTQ, whether that means drag queen story hours, kids being taken to drag shows, this mutilation, because what they're doing with these children is, say a little girl goes over and says, hey, I like the color blue, they're saying, oh, that makes you a boy. So what they're doing as well, it's an attack on what could be future gay youth.
Right.
You know, they're transing the gay away. And we are just here to make a point that the gay community is not a monolith.
Right.
It's not. We
Right.
don't have this hive mind, and it's disgusting that they're trying to make it look like the community does. Most of us actually are against all of this, but a lot of people are scared to speak up. So we are there.
Within the organization, you mean? Or
and out of it. So
Okay.
many people are so thankful the organization exists because they're seeing people actually who do have the courage to speak up about
Right.
it, because they're scared, because these people being propped up do not represent us, but they're making out like they do.
Oh,
That,
yeah,
you
like
know,
the
media-
Dylan Mulvaney's of
Yes.
the world.
Yes, that these people are making out like Jeffrey Marsh and people like Dylan Mulvaney speak for us, and they don't.
No.
The majority of us can see that this is insane what is taking place.
Yeah.
So Jamie started the organization so that we could call out all of this stuff happening under our
And you guys are national, right? Or international?
We're actually branching out. We've now got a chapter in the UK.
Okay.
Canada just started. We've got an interest from Japan, which is going to be really
Wow.
cool. So we're trying to branch out, and we've got a recruitment week coming up where we'll get a better look of where we're going to be chapterized across the world. But our biggest group is in the US at the moment. 'Cause that's
Okay.
where we started
What would you say to parents who don't necessarily, it's like we said when we first started, it's not in my backyard, so it must not be in anyone's backyard. What would you say to them as far as, what is actually, because we already identified the whole entire goal is to legalize pedophilia and socially accept pedophilia. It's even changing the name, right? They want to be called MAPS, minor attracted persons, instead of a pedophile. So what do you think, what would you say to parents who have young children who are basically in the belly of the beast right now? How would you say the best way is for the conversation and the protection for them? What would you say?
The best way to go about it is have a chat with your child and explain to them that what they're being told at school isn't necessarily in their best interest, and that if they say they've come to them saying they feel like this, that they feel like they're in the wrong body or something, first of all, you want to ask them how they came to that conclusion, because that's really important,
Right.
because it could be trauma-based and everything else. And then after that, you want to explain to them that it's okay for them to express themselves. Growing up is hard, especially if you're going through puberty, that a lot of confusion can come. You might think you're gay, you might think you're straight, you might be changing your
You never know.
But you
Right.
don't know. Hormones are crazy, they do crazy things to you. And just come from a place of absolute loving and understanding and say, look, if you still feel like this when you're older, then you're going to be old enough to make that choice yourself. Because an adult, you can't tell them what to do.
Right.
You can only
You
try
can
and
guide them
influence
through their thoughts.
Yeah,
Yes.
but you can't
yes.
tell them what to do. But if you just explain the risks, and obviously there's a possibility they're going to be like I was to my parents when I was young, and they're going to be, oh, you're really mean. But even if they think you're the worst person ever for a couple of months or maybe a year, when they're older, they could turn around to you, they could feel differently and say, I'm so glad you didn't put me through that. Or they could turn around to you and go, hey, I do feel the same, but this has been really tough, so I'm glad you didn't let me do it then.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about coming from a place of love. And the people who you were saying about the parents who are saying, oh, this isn't anything I've got to worry about, it's not happening in our kids' school. Well, what you want to say to that is, if you have children, you know what it's like to love a child and care about a child. So you should care about all children, even if they're not yours, because all children are vulnerable. all children are voiceless. They can't stand up for themselves. They think they're learning things. They don't realize they're being pumped with lies. So imagine that is your child. Right. Imagine your child is the one sat there being pumped with all this ideology, and then think, would you really want that? Right. And then also, the final icing on the cake of it is, it's not their school yet, but it will be, because this is global. I was just speaking about how it's happening in Wales. That's nowhere near this country. That's near England. This is a global thing. This curriculum comes from Alfred Kinsey Institute, and it is in the WHO description, which is the World Health Organization. The word world is there. This affects everybody. Everyone. Even if you don't think it's happening yet, it's coming.
It's just a matter of time. And I think whenever you are comfortably numb, you know, in your own world, it's like you can't get out ahead of it. It's just like what's happening with the other agenda that was happening to, there's a whole generation that did nothing or said nothing. You know, we don't have an excuse, in my opinion. We have more information, more connection, more skills and tools, and more resources than any other generation in time to stop this. It's just, do you have the courage? And that's what it is. It all is, and that's my favorite Bible verse is 2 Timothy 1:7, is that God does not give you a spirit of fear. It's of love, of courage, and sound mind. And I think that that's what we have to understand, that your generation, your world, and I, for one, Matt, am so grateful for your time, for your voice, because I know it's not easy. I mean, I get beat up. I'm sure you do too, and probably more so than I do. It is, but I just feel like when you find something to stand for, to me, you don't have an option not to, because I think that you've been prepared, like I said, for this moment in time, and your voice is extremely powerful. You're extremely compassionate about it, and more importantly, I think that people need to learn to support without the judgment when the outcome is protecting the innocence of children. I think that's a huge thing. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to link Gays Against Groomers. We're going to link Matt's website as well. You have a website or just Instagram?
I have Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram.
All the socials.
Yeah.
So we'll put that in the show. And then if you guys have any questions for Matt, you can DM us or always contact Matt as well. And more importantly, go out and create your own ripple effect of change and stand for something that matters.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add is it is hard speaking out, but honestly, they regurgitate a lot of the same insults. Once you've heard each one of them once, you just laugh after that because they're like a broken record. They can't think of anything original. No. It's always, why aren't you talking about the church as well? Right. We all know that we're against all grooming, but we're calling out this grooming right now. And then the other one they like to do is, you're a Nazi, you're far right.
Oh, yeah, you're a bigot, you're this,
Honestly, it gets really boring. Once you've heard it once, it won't bother you anymore. You'll just feel sorry for them, if anything, that they can't come up with anything on their own.
Well, and they can't defend their own viewpoint. They can't defend it.
They're getting it from media heads. They don't actually feel that way. They don't know how they feel.
No.
I don't think they've even taken the time to think about it.
No, I don't either. So you guys, all the information will be in the show notes, and please like and subscribe for more of this information, and we may have Matt back on again, maybe.
I would love to.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for joining us today on the TLM Method podcast. I hope that you've enjoyed the time that you've spent with us, and more importantly, I hope that we make you think. For more information about what we do, our work, and our message, please visit us at our website at officiallytraceymartin.com, and that Tracey is Tracey, or you can find us on Instagram at officiallytraceymartin. We look forward to having you with us for more episodes of the TLM Method podcast.